Chapter 5. The Sun-Scorched Front. 5 years later. The D-rank dungeon was silent, save for the sound of a heavy body hitting the floor. Izuku Midoriya, now 13 years old, stood over the corpse of a giant basilisk. He didn't pant. He didn't celebrate. He just wiped a splatter of green blood off his cheek with a look of utter boredom. He had changed. The baby fat was gone, replaced by lean, corded muscle. His hair was longer, tied back in a messy bun, and his eyes, once wide with fear, were now sharp and calculating. He wore a black trench coat over combat gear he had scavenged from the shop, looking less like a hero and more like a reaper. Another dud, Izuku muttered, kicking the basilisk's snout. Boss defeated. Giant basilisk, LVL 35. EXP gained. 15. 15 experience. Izuku sighed, dismissing the notification with a flick of his finger. At this rate, I'll be 80 before we hit the cap. Bahadur sat on a rock nearby, sharpening his steel longsword. He had also changed. The ancient armor was gone, replaced by modern tactical gear, and a t-shirt that said, "Plants are friends, a gift from Izuku." He checked a cheap digital watch on his wrist. "Relax, Izuku," Bahadur said, his voice dropping the archaic weight it once held. 5 years of modern TV and convenience store runs had scrubbed the medieval knight right out of him. You can't rush the grind. Besides, my radishes in the real world need watering. Can we bounce? Not yet, Izuku said. He opened his status window. Name, Izuku Midoriya. Level 99 EXP, 99.9%. Class, Grim Reaper. It hadn't been all boring dungeon crawls. In the real world, they'd run errands for AFO, meeting shady figures like Overhaul, a germaphobe Izuku didn't care for, and scouting potential recruits. Izuku had even branded their little duo the Black Cross. It's a way better name than the League of Villains. Izuku had told Shigaraki just last week, shouting the League part just to spite the gamer. Your name is way too simple. But the real grind was for points. Izuku switched tabs to the shop, staring at the grail item. Holy Sword of Ascalon, 10 million PTS. He wasn't even halfway there. You know I don't need it, Bahadur said, catching Izuku's gaze. I'm strong enough with this piece of steel. Seriously, save your points. Not good enough. Izuku replied stubbornly, I want you at your peak. Nothing stops us. Bahadur rolled his eyes but didn't argue further. He knew Izuku was stubborn. Fine, but if we're staying, let's wrap this up. One more mob, Izuku said, turning toward the dungeon exit. I can feel it. As if on cue, a small cave slime wiggled out from behind a rock. Izuku didn't even summon his scythe. He pointed a finger. Shadow bullet. A small bolt of dark energy pierced the slime. It dissolved. EXP gained. 1. A chime rang out, louder and deeper than usual. The blue box expanded, turning gold. Congratulations. Level 100 reached. Tier 1 cap broken. New feature unlocked. C-rank dungeons. Izuku grinned. It wasn't a nice smile. It was a hungry smile of a predator finally let out of a cage. Finally, he whispered. Bahadur, gear up. We're leaving the kiddie pool. The transition to the C-rank instance was different. Usually it was instant. This time, there was a sensation of weight, as if gravity had doubled. Instance created. Progenitor's Revenge C-rank. Time dilation. 1 minute reel equals 1 day dungeon. Environment, hostile. When Izuku opened his eyes, the first thing he felt was a heat. It wasn't just hot, it was oppressive. The sun hanging in the sky was a massive, angry red ore that seemed too close to the earth. The ground was cracked, dry earth that stretched out into a wasteland of dead, blackened trees. Warning, environmental debuff detected. Status, Sunscorch. Effect, slowly drain stamina and HP while exposed to direct sunlight. By the gods, Bahadur hissed, shielding his eyes. Okay, this heat feels personal. It's draining us, Izuku noted, watching his HP bar tick down by 1 point every few seconds. We need to find cover or finish this quick. Izuku, Bahadur said, pointing his sword. Check that out. Izuku followed the paladin's gaze. In the distance, rising like a mirage from the heat waves, was a fortress. It was built of gray stone, flying a banner with a golden sun. But it wasn't peaceful. Smoke was rising from the walls. And even from this distance, they could hear the screams. People? Izuku frowned. Dungeons usually just have monsters. They are under siege, Bahadur said. The playfulness of the gardening hobbyist vanished instantly. Those are humans on the walls, and those things attacking them. Izuku squinted. Swarming the base of the fortress were hundreds of humanoid figures. They moved like animals, clawing at the stone. Enemy! Vampire spawn underling. LVL 65. Level 65. Izuku whistled. That's a jump from the basilisk. Bahadur didn't wait. They need help. Bahadur, wait! Izuku called out, but the knight was already sprinting, his boots kicking up dust clouds. Damn hero complex. Izuku cursed. He summoned his scythe, Reaper's best friend, which had grown over the years to match his height, the blade now pulsing with a deeper violet light. He took off after his partner. The battle at the gates was a slaughter. The knights on the wall were wearing shining armor, but it was dented and bloodied. They were holding the line with spears, but the underlings were relentless, climbing over piles of their own dead to reach the parapets. Captain Frederick, a man with graying hair and a jaw like a steel trap, swung his mace, crushing a vampire's skull. Hold the line, Frederick roared. For the pure syndicate. For humanity. Sir, the west gate is buckling, a soldier screamed. Reinforce it. We hold until sunset, or we die try. Frederick stopped. He looked out at the desert. A silver blur smashed into the rear guard of the vampire horde. Bahadur hit the line like a wrecking ball. Light blade. His sword extended with a beam of pure holy energy. He swung in a wide arc, cleaving 3 vampires in half. The monsters shrieked as the holy magic burned their regenerating flesh. Come on, then, Bahadur shouted, his voice booming over the din of battle. I'm right here. The vampires turned, hissing at the light. They swarmed him. Frederick watched in horror. He's going to be overrun. Then the sky darkened. Izuku leaped from a dead tree, spinning in the air. He landed in the center of the swarm, surrounding Bahadur. Shadow scythe, harvest moon. Izuku spun. The scythe created a perfect black circle. 10 heads flew into the air simultaneously. The vampires hesitated. They looked at the boy in the black coat, sensing the death radiating off him. You guys give way more XP than slimes, Izuku said, checking his notification log. EXP gained. EXP gained. Bahadur, take the left flank, Izuku ordered, his voice calm amidst the chaos. I'll clean up the middle. You got it, boss. It wasn't a battle. It was a harvest. For 5 years, Izuku and Bahadur had fought monsters while heavily overleveled. They had learned to fight perfectly, because one mistake in the early days meant death. Against enemies that were actually a challenge, they were a whirlwind of light and shadow. Within 10 minutes, the horde was broken. The surviving vampires screeched and fled into the shimmering heat of the desert. Izuku stood amidst the dissolving bodies, flicking black ichor off his coat. He checked his stats. Level 101. Finally, he muttered, open the gates. Frederick's voice rang out from the wall. The inside of the fortress smelled of sweat, iron, and fear. Izuku and Bahadur were surrounded by knights. Spears were pointed at them, but the hands holding them were shaking. Captain Frederick pushed through the circle. He looked at Bahadur's strange mix of tactical gear and t-shirt, then at Izuku's scythe. Who are you? Frederick demanded. You fight like demons, but you save my men. Izuku stepped forward. He had rehearsed this. We don't know. Frederick frowned. Excuse me? We woke up in the desert about an hour ago. Izuku lied smoothly. My name is Izuku. This is Bahadur. We have no memory of how we got here, or who we were before. We just knew those things were enemies. Bahadur nodded solemnly. It's the truth. My mind is a fog. Frederick studied them. He looked at Izuku's eyes, too old for a child, and Bahadur's stance. He didn't believe them. Not fully, but he looked around at his wounded men and the cracked walls of his fortress. "We are at war," Frederick said, sheathing his mace. "Dracula's forces grow stronger every night. I don't care where you came from. If you can kill vampires like that, you are welcome in the Pure Syndicate." "Dracula?" Izuku asked, feigning ignorance. "The Lord of Vampires," Frederick spat. "He seeks to plunge this world into eternal night. We are the last line of defense." He gestured to the main keep. "Come, you need to meet the commander. If anyone can figure out what to do with 2 amnesiac super soldiers, it's her." Izuku glanced at Bahadur. They shared a look. Quest accepted. "Lead the way," Izuku said. Chapter 6. The Bloodline Commander. The keep was cooler than the desert outside, but the air was thick with tension. Soldiers scrambled back and forth carrying maps and wounded comrades, ignoring the 2 strangers walking behind Captain Frederick. They stopped in front of a heavy oak door guarded by 2 knights in full-plate armor. The guards crossed their halberds. "Captain," one guard grunted, "the commander is in a foul mood. The supply line from the east was cut. I have news that might improve her mood," Frederick said, gesturing to Izuku and Bahadur. "Open it." The door swung open. The room inside was dominated by a massive tactical table covered in wooden figures. Standing over it was a girl who looked no older than 16, though her eyes held the exhaustion of a veteran. She had long pink hair tied back in a severe ponytail and wore a white military coat over a black bodysuit. A katana with a black hilt rested at her hip. She didn't look up. "Frederick, if you're here to tell me we lost the West Gate, spare me the report and hand me your resignation." "The West Gate holds, Commander," Frederick said, saluting, "thanks to these 2. Syra finally looked up. Her gaze swept over Bahadur's tactical gear and Izuku's scythe. She didn't smile. She didn't offer a greeting. She rested her hand on the hilt of her sword. "Mercenaries?" she asked, her voice sharp. "Amnesiacs," Frederick corrected. "They wiped out a horde of elite spawns in 10 minutes. Just the 2 of them." Syra's eyes narrowed. She walked around the table, stopping inches from Izuku. The height difference wasn't much, but her presence was heavy. "Amnesiacs," she repeated, tasting the lie. "How convenient. 2 super soldiers wander out of the cursed waste with no memory, right when we're desperate for reinforcements." "It's the truth," Izuku said, keeping his face blank. "Liar," Syra stated flatly. She drew her katana. The metal hissed against the sheath. "Ignite!" The blade didn't just catch fire. It became fire. The metal turned to translucent orange, radiating heat so intense that the papers on the tactical table curled and blackened. "Warning, high-level threat detected." "Skill detected. Ra's Wrath, Bloodline Enchantment. Izuku instinctively reached for his scythe, but Bahadur stepped in front of him, hand on his sword. "Easy, Bahadur," Izuku whispered. He focused on the flaming sword. "System, analyze. Can I copy it? Analysis complete. Error, unable to copy. Restriction, bloodline DNA required. Skill is locked to the user's genetic code." Izuku grit his teeth. In the lower ranks, he could buy almost any element or skill, but here, power was locked behind genetics. He couldn't just pay to win this time. Syra held the blade steady, the fire reflecting in her eyes. "I don't trust you. You reek of secrets. But Frederick is right. We are losing this war. I don't need you to be honest. I need you to be useful." She sheathed the blade. The heat vanished instantly. "There's a bunker 10 miles north," Syra said, walking back to the map. "It belongs to the Ravenblade faction. They are supplying Dracula with intel on our movements. I sent 3 squads to secure it. None returned." She slammed a wooden piece onto the map. "Infiltrate the bunker. Retrieve their intel logs. If you come back alive, I'll believe you're on our side. If you die, well, then I don't have to worry about spies." Izuku looked at the map. It was clearly a suicide mission, a test to see if they were worth the trouble. Quest accepted the suicide test. Reward, trust of the commander. "We'll be back by dawn," Izuku said. Syra smirked, sharp and dangerous. "Don't make promises you can't keep, kid." The bunker was buried beneath a dune of black sand. Stealth, Bahadur whispered, crouching behind a rock. Not exactly my specialty. Just don't yell justice before you hit someone, Izuku muttered. Shadow step. He dissolved into mist, reappearing behind the lone guard at the entrance. Before the guard could turn, Izuku placed a hand over his mouth. The guard slumped, unconscious but alive. Bahadur moved up, dragging the body into the shadows. Clean. They slipped inside. The interior was sleek metal, lit by red emergency lights. Cameras swept the hallways in predictable arcs. I'll handle the eyes, Izuku said. He flicked his wrist, sending tiny blobs of dark slime to cover the camera lenses. They moved deeper, bypassing patrols. Izuku's map, skill-filled in the layout as they explored. Barracks, armory, command center, artifact storage. The intel should be in a command center, Bahadur whispered. You get the intel, Izuku said, his eyes locking onto the artifact storage room on his mini-map. I feel something pulling me. Bahadur frowned. Izuku, the mission. I'll be right behind you. Just get the files. They split up. Izuku moved toward the heavy blast door marked restricted. He hacked the keypad, a simple minigame for his system. As the numbers aligned, a date flashed briefly on the terminal screen. Year 520, era of the Sunscorch. The door hissed open. The room was cold. Shelves lined the walls, filled with strange glowing stones and ancient weapons. But in the center of the room, dominating the space, was a coffin. It stood upright, made of a black metal that seemed to absorb the light. Carved into the surface were endless, spiraling loops. Item: the loop coffin, status sealed. Seal level, S rank. Izuku walked closer. The air around the coffin vibrated with a low hum. It felt like standing next to a nuclear reactor. Why seal a coffin? Izuku whispered. He touched the surface. A riddle appeared in a holographic projection from the system itself, translating the ancient runes. To wake the dreamer, you must speak the name of the nightmare. Hint: she is the first, but she is alone. Izuku thought back to the lore Frederick had mentioned. Dracula was the lord of vampires. But usually in these stories, there was someone before the lord. A source. He looked at the loops. Endless circles. A cycle with no end. The first, Izuku mused, the progenitor. He traced the loops with his finger. Alice, he guessed, remembering a name from an old book in AFO's library about vampire myths. Or maybe it was just a lucky guess fueled by the Alice in Wonderland vibe of the loops. Click. The locks disengaged. The heavy metal door groaned, swinging open with a blast of pressurized air. Inside was a girl. She was small, pale as moonlight, with white hair that floated around her as if she were underwater. Her eyes were closed. She looked peaceful. Then she opened her eyes. They were red, not the angry red of the sun outside, but the deep blood red of a fresh wound. Izuku froze. His danger sense was screaming so loud it was physically painful. Entity, Alice, progenitor vampire, level. She didn't move. She just stared at him. Then a wave of pressure, pure, unfiltered killing intent, slammed into Izuku. It forced him to his knees. The shelves rattled. Glass cases shattered. Bahadur burst into the room, sword drawn. Izuku, I felt a... He stopped, freezing in the doorway, paralyzed by the sheer weight of her presence. The girl stepped out of the coffin. Her bare feet touched the cold metal floor. What year is it? She asked. Her voice was soft, but it carried across the room like a bell. Izuku struggled to breathe against the pressure. It's the era of the Sunscorch. Year 520. Alice tilted her head. Her expression remained blank, but the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. 500 years, she whispered. He left me in here for 500 years. The killing intent spiked, cracking the floor beneath her feet. Where's Nicholas? She asked, looking at Izuku. Where's the bastard who calls himself Dracula? Izuku swallowed blood. He looked up at the girl who was radiating enough power to level the bunker. I think, Izuku wheezed, We have a common enemy.